Deep beneath the earth, a single torch flickers in an endless darkness. This is the realm of the Lampads, the mysterious torch bearing nymphs of Greek myth who illuminate the underworld's shadowy paths. While everyone knows Cerberus and Hades, the stories of these guiding spirits have been largely forgotten, and that is a true shame. By the end of our journey, you will know the secrets of these elusive figures and understand their vital role in the ancient cosmos. We will uncover why their ghostly light was so feared and revered, and what their torches can reveal about the deepest fears and hopes of the ancient world. What part of the underworld most captures your own imagination? Their light was not meant for the world above. The Lampads were a unique sisterhood of nymphs bound entirely to the earth's deepest shadows. Unlike the dryads who danced in sunlit forests or the naiads who sang in sparkling streams, these nymphs called the silent, cavernous depths of the underworld their home. They were not mere residents, however, but essential guides. Each Lampad carried a single, ever-burning torch, its flame casting a cold, spectral light that did not warm the skin but somehow illuminated the soul's path forward. This was their sacred duty, to banish the absolute blackness of the realm of Hades, creating a road through the gloom for the newly arrived shades of the deceased. Without their ghostly beacons, the dead would wander forever, lost in an impenetrable darkness. But they did not only serve the departed. Their most famous allegiance was to the formidable goddess Hecate, the mistress of magic and crossroads. When Hecate walked the boundaries between worlds, it was the Lampads who flanked her, their torches held high, transforming the goddess into a terrifying and awe-inspiring procession of moving light in the absolute dark. So the next time you picture the underworld, do not see only a void. See the silent, graceful figures holding their flames steady, the only points of orientation in an endless night. What must it be like to be a creature of such radiant purpose, yet forever denied the warmth of the sun? Their otherworldly light was a birthright, drawn directly from the rivers of the underworld itself. The Lampads were most often said to be the daughters of the great, primordial rivers that flowed through Hades. Picture their father as the river Styx, the sacred waters upon which even the gods swore their most binding oaths, an entity of immense ancient power. Or consider the Acheron, the river of woe, whose very currents were said to be made from the tears of the dead. This was not a mere detail of family trees, it was the very core of their identity. Their lineage bound them to the underworld as completely as a tree is bound to the soil from which it grows. They were not visitors or servants who could leave. They were literal children of the land, their essence woven from its darkness and its sorrow. Think of it this way: a sea nymph is made of salt water and ocean foam, so a Lampad is made of subterranean stone and the chilling mist that rises from a ghostly river. This divine parentage explains why their torches burned with such a cold, spectral flame. It was not a fire of the sun, but a light born from the liquid darkness of the Styx, or a glow filtered through the profound grief of the Acheron. They carried the light of their fathers, a light that could only exist and only had purpose in the absolute dark. So when a Lampad raised her torch, she was not just holding a tool, she was channeling the very substance of the underworld, illuminating paths with the essence of oath and lament. How could such a being ever walk in the world above when their soul is a fragment of the world below? That torch was far more than a simple source of light. In the hands of a Lampad, it became a profound symbol, a multi-layered promise in the underworld's oppressive gloom. Its most obvious meaning was guidance, a beacon to prevent the souls of the dead from becoming eternally lost. But this guidance was not about showing the way to a pleasant destination. It revealed the only path available, a road through a landscape of fear and finality. The light did not comfort, it simply presented the stark, unavoidable truth of one's new existence. This leads to its second, deeper meaning, the revelation of hidden truths. Just as a lamp in a dark room exposes what was once concealed, the Lampad's torch illuminated the reality of the afterlife, stripping away all earthly illusions. There was no hiding from its cold glow. This symbolic power connected them directly to the world of the living, specifically to the rituals of the goddess Hecate. At crossroads, where choices were made and futures decided, worshippers would leave offerings for Hecate, often at night. These rites were performed by torchlight, a direct echo of the Lampad's own duties. The torchlight at a crossroads was a plea for clarity, for a revelation of the right path, mirroring the way a Lampad's flame revealed the path through the afterlife. This stands in stark contrast to another famous torch from myth, the fire brought to humanity by Prometheus. His was a fire of technology, of civilization, of warmth and progress. It was a defiant theft from the gods meant to elevate humankind. The Lampad's torch was the complete opposite. It was a light granted by the gods, not stolen. It offered no warmth, fostered no industry, and promised no progress. It served only one purpose: to illuminate a destiny that was already sealed. One flame was a gift of hope for the living, the other was a necessary guide for the dead. One was a tool for building a future, the other was a light for accepting an end. So the next time you see a single light in the darkness, ask yourself, what kind of truth is it meant to reveal? This deep, inherent bond with the underworld made them the perfect companions for its most formidable traveler. The Lampads are inseparable from the goddess Hecate, the ancient deity of magic, ghosts, and the crossroads. When Hecate walked, she never walked alone. Her nightly processions through the deepest dark were flanked by these torch-bearing nymphs, their cold flames cutting a swath through the nothingness. Imagine the scene, not with your eyes but with your soul. A profound and absolute silence, broken only by the whisper of ethereal footsteps. Then a light appears, not one but many, moving as a single entity. This was Hecate's entourage, a living, breathing constellation in the underworld's firmament, with the goddess herself as its dark center. The Lampads did not merely light her way, they amplified her presence, transforming a solitary goddess into a terrifying and majestic parade of power. Their torches were a declaration, a visible manifestation of Hecate's authority over the spaces between worlds. Wherever the boundaries between the living and the dead grew thin, at a lonely crossroads or a freshly dug grave, their Hecate and her Lampads could be felt, their collective light a signal that the veil was at its most fragile. This was not a role of simple servitude, it was a sacred partnership. The Lampads provided the very illumination by which Hecate exercised her most profound magic. Their light defined the ritual space for her nocturnal rites, creating a circle of influence where her spells to guide or to restrain the restless dead could take hold. They were the essential component in her nightly patrol, the mobile beacons that allowed the mistress of the crossroads to see and be seen by all that moved in the shadows. What kind of spells would require a light that itself is born from the river of oath and sorrow? Picture a newly arrived soul standing at the bank of the Acheron, utterly disoriented by the oppressive silence. The only sound is the faint, mournful flow of the river of woe, and the only break in the absolute blackness is a distant, bobbing point of light. As it draws closer, the soul sees the graceful, silent form of a Lampad, her expression serene yet distant, her torch held aloft. The light it casts is not warm or golden, but a cold, blue-white flame that seems to drink the heat from the air. It flickers over the water, making the river's dark surface look like shifting obsidian, and illuminates the path ahead, a narrow road etched into the stark, rocky ground. This is not a journey of comfort, but one of necessity. The Lampad does not speak, she only turns and begins to walk, her light creating a moving island of vision in the endless night. The soul has no choice but to follow, step by hesitant step, into the unknown. The path might skirt the edge of Tartarus, where the torchlight would catch the glint of jagged iron gates and cast long, dancing shadows that twist like the tormented forms imprisoned within. Or it might wind toward the Elysian fields, where the same cold light would gently caress the asphodel flowers, making their pale blossoms glow with an unearthly, silvered luminescence. In every landscape, the Lampad's torch defines what is real and what is path, revealing the architecture of the afterlife itself. The light does not judge the destinations, it only makes them visible. It is the first and last truth a soul encounters, a silent guide through a realm where all other senses fail. What thoughts would race through a mind confronted with such a stark and beautiful escort, a being whose only purpose is to lead you toward your eternal rest? This silent, guiding role sets the Lampads apart from the Underworld's other inhabitants. While they illuminate the path, other entities exist to judge, punish, or demand payment. Take Charon, the aged boatman of the river Styx. He is a figure of transaction, not guidance. His role is conditional. A soul cannot even begin its journey without the proper coin placed upon its lips at burial. Where a Lampad offers her light as a natural duty, Charon requires a fair, his is a necessary yet grim and commercial, exchange at the very threshold of the afterlife. Then there are the Furies, the three terrifying goddesses of vengeance. Their purpose is singular and brutal, to torment those who have committed crimes against their own kin, especially murder. They are the Underworld's executioners, relentless and savage. The Lampads, by contrast, are serene and impartial. They do not chase souls, they lead them. They hold no whip, only a torch. Even the Kyrs, often confused with the Furies, were spirits of violent death and doom. They were seen as dark, clawed beings who feasted on the blood of the slain on battlefields before dragging their souls downward. The Lampads have no such hunger. They do not cause suffering, they simply witness it, their light falling equally upon the virtuous and the damned. This contrast defines their unique place in the cosmic order. The Underworld is a system of balances. It requires its jailers and its avengers, but it also requires its guides. The Furies represent divine justice, Charon represents the necessary transition, and the Lampads represent a form of mercy, the simple, unearned gift of not having to wander in total darkness for eternity. Their presence softens the realm's inherent terror, not by removing the punishment, but by ensuring no one is lost along the way. In a world defined by final judgments and harsh reckonings, their quiet service is perhaps the closest thing to compassion a shade will ever find. This quiet compassion finds its most poignant expression in the greatest story of the Underworld, the tale of Persephone. Every year, the daughter of Demeter makes her solemn descent, and we are left to wonder who lights her way. It is a compelling thought that the Lampads, the Underworld's own guiding spirits, would be the ones to greet their queen. As Persephone crosses the threshold from the world of the living to the realm of her husband Hades, the air grows cold and the last hints of sunlight fade. In that moment of profound transition, the soft, cold glow of the Lampads' torches would appear not as a threat but as a solemn welcome. They would not lead her as a lost soul, but escort her as a sovereign, their silent procession marking her official return to her dark throne. Their light, born from the rivers of the Underworld itself, would be the first thing to acknowledge her power in this domain, and when the time came for her to ascend back to the world above, these same nymphs would illuminate the upward path, their torches creating a bridge of light through the cavernous depths until the first rays of the sun could take over. This cyclical journey is the very heart of their symbolism. The Lampads, in their silent service, become living representations of the endless cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Persephone's descent brings winter, a time when the earth is cold, dark, and barren, much like the realm the Lampads call home. Her return brings the spring, an explosion of life and light. The Lampads are the constant witnesses to this cosmic dance, their torches burning steadily through both the despair of the queen's departure and the joy of her return. They do not cause the seasons, but their light makes the transition between them possible, both in the myth and in its meaning. They illuminate the necessary path of decay that leads to renewal, of death that makes life possible. In this role, they transform from simple guides for the dead into essential cogs in the machinery of the world itself. Their cold flame is not just for the departed, but for the very rhythm of existence. What deeper truth could a light hold than one that shows the way through death itself to guarantee that life will always begin again? While their presence is felt throughout the Underworld's lore, we find their names etched in the bedrock of myth itself, within the ancient texts that first gave them form. Hesiod's Theogony, a foundational poem detailing the birth of the gods, provides one of our clearest glimpses. He describes them not as vague spirits, but as daughters of the earth and the abyss, listing them among the formidable children of Nyx, the primordial night. Their very origin from darkness explains their nature. They are born from the absence of light, and thus they carry a light that is native to that absence. In the epic Argonautica, their role becomes vividly active. The sorceress Medea, in her most desperate hour, calls upon Hecate, and the poet tells us that the very nymphs of the underworld, the Lampads, heard her cry. They are depicted circling a central pit, their torches held high as Medea performs her dark rites. The hissing of their flames and the swirling of their shadowy forms create a terrifying and sacred atmosphere, a ritual space where the boundaries of life and death are dissolved by their combined power. This is not a passive illumination, it is a vital, active component of the most potent magic. Their light is the catalyst. In the plays of Aeschylus and other tragedians, their name is invoked to evoke the deepest dread and the most profound mysteries. They are the torch-bearers for the Furies, lighting the path for the avenging deities as they hunt their prey across the mortal world and into the depths below. A single line from a chorus can summon the image of their cold fire glinting in the eyes of the haunted, a constant reminder that the justice of the underworld is always watching. These literary appearances solidify their function. They are the indispensable stagehands of the cosmic drama, their silent, glowing presence making the great events of myth possible, from a hero's quest to a goddess's terrible curse. They are the light by which the ancient poets allowed their audiences to see the unseen. How many other stories, now lost to time, once featured their guiding flames in the margins of the action? This was no ordinary fire, for it cast no warmth upon the skin. The light of a lampad's torch was a paradox, a flame that seemed to feed on the cold, drawing its energy from the very shadows it pushed back. It did not burn with the cheerful, crackling heat of a hearth, but with a silent, steady luminescence like moonlight filtered through deep water. One could stare directly into its core and feel a chill, as if the light were not an emitter of energy but a quiet consumer of it. This spectral glow possessed unique properties that defined its purpose in the underworld. It is likely this flame was not even visible to the living, flickering into existence only for those who had crossed the final threshold. For a newly arrived soul, it would be the first and only thing they could truly see, a beacon in a void that rendered all other senses useless. Its most profound ability, however, may have been its power to reveal what was truly there. Just as a blacklight can expose hidden stains, the lampad's torch could have illuminated the invisible architecture of the afterlife. It would make the path itself materialize from the gloom, and its beams would likely pass straight through the ethereal forms of other shades, revealing them as translucent, shimmering outlines. This light did not fall upon surfaces, it fell upon essences, making the spiritual realm starkly, undeniably real. It showed a soul not just where it was, but what it had become. This explains why their guidance was so absolute. To be bathed in that cold fire was to be stripped of all earthly delusions, to see the landscape of eternity with perfect, unforgiving clarity. The torch did not point the way to salvation or punishment. It simply revealed the road you were destined to walk, a path your own life had carved through the darkness. What would you see if such a light were turned upon you? The cold fire of the Lampads was not confined to the pages of poetry. We can still see their echoes today, frozen in time on the cracked surfaces of ancient Greek vases. Unlike the majestic sculptures of Olympian gods, the depictions of these underworld nymphs are often more subtle, found in the margins of larger scenes, their presence a quiet but vital detail in the storytelling of art. They are typically shown as graceful, solemn young women, their forms draped in simple, flowing chiton garments that seem to ripple with an unseen movement. Their most defining feature, of course, is the torch they carry. It is not a crude, blazing brand, but often a slender, ceremonial thyrsus, a long fennel stalk topped with a pine cone and wreathed in vines, a symbol more commonly associated with Dionysus, hinting at a mysterious link between the ecstasy of life and the solemnity of death. In some renderings, they hold these torches upright, their flames rendered as a simple, painted lick of black or red against the terracotta clay, a stark and powerful symbol of illumination in the dark underworld landscape. On a famous vase depicting the abduction of Persephone, for instance, you might spot a Lampad standing near the edge of the scene, her torch held not as a weapon, but as a somber witness, her light defining the moment the goddess crosses from one world into the next. They are rarely the focus, and that is precisely the point. Their role was to illuminate the action, not to dominate it. They frame the great mythological events, their silent, glowing forms acting as human-shaped candles in the grand, dark theater of the afterlife. Their attire is simple, their expressions are often serene and detached, reflecting their impartial nature. They do not celebrate or mourn the fates of the heroes and gods they accompany, they simply light the stage. To see them on these ancient vessels is to understand that for the Greeks, the boundary between the living world and the dead was not an abstract idea, but a tangible space populated by these essential guiding spirits. What stories are we missing? What other scenes of guidance and transition that have faded from the pottery shards we have yet to find? Their very essence was woven from the fabric of night itself. As daughters of Nyx, the primordial goddess of night, the Lampads were not just comfortable in the darkness, they were literal extensions of it. Nyx was one of the first beings to emerge from the void of chaos, a power so immense that even Zeus himself was said to hold her in awe. From her, the Lampads inherited their domain not as a place of evil, but as a fundamental, necessary force of the cosmos. The ancient Greeks did not view the night as we often do today, as merely the absence of day. It was a separate, potent realm, a time when the rational world of sunlight receded and a more mysterious spiritual order took hold. This was the hour for spirits to walk, for magic to be practiced, and for the hidden truths of the universe to reveal themselves to those brave enough to seek them. In this context, the Lampads were far more than guides. They were the custodians of this liminal space. Their torches were the only lights deemed appropriate for such profound darkness, a light born from night itself to illuminate the secrets that night contained. They shared this nocturnal realm with other children of Nyx, like the Wanneroi, the spirits of dreams who carried visions from the gods to mortals, and the Kirs, spirits of doom. Yet while their siblings dealt in sleep and death, the Lampads dealt in revelation. Their light was the key that unlocked the mysteries hidden between sunset and sunrise, whether that meant lighting the path for a ghost in the underworld or for a mortal sorceress performing a ritual at a crossroads. To carry a torch in the eternal night of Hades was to acknowledge that even in the deepest darkness, there is an order, a path, and a truth waiting to be seen. What knowledge might be found only by a light that does not chase away the dark but converses with it? Their cold, spectral flames became the very instrument of ancient magic. In the world of Greek sorcery, light was not just for seeing, it was for defining. A circle drawn on the ground was just a shape in the dirt, but a circle illuminated by torchlight, especially the torchlight of a Lampad, became a sacred boundary between worlds. This is why their essence was so crucial to the rites of Hecate, the goddess who held the keys to the spirit realm. When a witch or a sorcerer sought to peer beyond the veil of life, to summon a ghost for counsel or to bend the threads of fate, they would call upon Hecate at a crossroads under the cover of night. And in these invocations, the Lampads were not merely symbolic, they were active participants. The practitioner would light their own torches, mimicking the nymphs' cold fire, believing that the very act summoned the attention and power of these underworld guides. The flickering light was thought to create a pocket of the underworld right there on the mortal plane, a space where the rules of life and death could be temporarily suspended. Think of a necromancer standing in that trembling circle of light, chanting names of the long departed. The torch flame was his connection, a spiritual wire stretched taut between the living and the dead. It was believed that the Lampads, drawn by the familiar glow, would gather at the edges of the ritual, their silent presence empowering the spell, their torches acting as a beacon for the summoned spirit to follow out of the darkness. This was not a gentle magic, it was a dangerous pulling at the cosmic fabric, and the Lampad's light was the necessary tool, both a guide and a warning. It illuminated the path for the ghost, but it also revealed the immense risk the mortal was taking by trespassing in the domains of the dead. Their association with magic therefore completes their portrait. They were not just guides for the dead, but the chosen illuminators for the living who dared to seek the ultimate secrets. What would it feel like to hold a light that could, for a moment, make the shadows of the departed walk and speak? While their presence was felt throughout the Greek world, the Lampads rarely stepped into the spotlight of public cult worship. Unlike the grand temples of Zeus or the joyful festivals for Dionysus, reverence for these underworld nymphs was a quieter, more localized affair, often woven into the fabric of regional mystery traditions. The most significant site to feel their influence was Eleusis, home to the most famous mystery cult of the ancient world. Initiates at Eleusis underwent a profound ritual journey meant to symbolize the descent into the underworld and the triumphant return, a direct parallel to the myth of Persephone. While we lack explicit temple inscriptions to the Lampads, their symbolic role was undeniable. The climax of the Eleusinian rites involved a dramatic revelation in a dark hall, a single, blazing light that shattered the darkness and promised rebirth. This sacred fire was a direct echo of the Lampad's torch, a controlled, ritualized version of the very light that guides souls through Hades. For those initiates, the experience was not just about hearing a story, but about walking the path themselves, illuminated by a flame that held the same promise of orientation and revelation as a Lampad's beacon. Beyond Eleusis, their veneration was deeply tied to the cult of their mistress Hecate. At crossroads throughout Greece, especially in regions like Attica, small shrines called Hecatea were erected. These were often three-sided pillars bearing the goddess's image, and it was here, under the cover of night, that offerings were left. These offerings of honey, garlic, and black puppies were as much for Hecate's retinue as for the goddess herself, a plea for the Lampads to cast their light upon a difficult decision or to illuminate the right path forward. In the region of Arcadia, a land known for its wild, mountainous terrain and ancient pre-Olympian deities, Hecate was worshipped with particular intensity. It is easy to imagine that in such a place where dark forests and deep caves mirrored the underworld itself, the stories of the Lampads felt especially immediate. Their worship was not about building grand statues, but about recognizing their essential function in the unseen world, a function so vital that it required acknowledgement at the lonely places where one world bled into another. Yet as Greek culture flowed into the rising power of Rome, the distinct light of the Lampads began to flicker and change. The Romans were masters of absorption, taking the gods and myths of others and remolding them to fit their own worldview. For the Lampads, this meant a slow but steady erosion of their unique identity. The Romans had their own rich tapestry of underworld spirits, and the torch-bearing nymphs were often absorbed into this existing caste. They became frequently conflated with the lemures, the restless and often malevolent ghosts of the dead who were feared and placated during the festival of Lemuria. Where the Greek Lampads were divine guides, the Roman lemures were spectral troublemakers, and this association blurred the line between a benevolent guide and a potentially dangerous ghost. Their torches, once symbols of sacred revelation, could now be misinterpreted as the sinister lights of wandering, angry spirits. The Roman underworld, or Orcus, was a more bureaucratic and less personalized realm than the Greek Hades, and the need for individualized, compassionate guides seemed to lessen. The journey of the soul became a matter of legalistic judgment and ferry rides, with less emphasis on the nuanced spiritual path illuminated by a nymph's flame. Their most defining relationship also shifted. While Hecate was adopted into Roman myth as Trivia, the goddess of three-way crossroads, the specific, poetic partnership with a retinue of Lampads faded. The image of a solitary goddess at a crossroads overtook the majestic, terrifying procession of goddess and nymphs moving as one through the darkness. The Lampads did not vanish, but their light was diluted, mixed into the broader and more impersonal glow of Rome's spirit world. They became less themselves and more a forgotten part of a larger, less distinct pantheon of night spirits. Why does a culture's view of the afterlife so directly shape the spirits it chooses to remember in detail, and those it allows to fade into the background? That cold, spectral torch did not vanish with the statues of Olympus. It simply changed form, reappearing in the misty fens and lonely moors of later Europe as the will-o'-the-wisp. These phantom lights, known by countless names like jack-o'-lanterns or fairy fires, behave with a cruel mimicry of the Lampad's sacred duty. They too appear as a guiding glow in profound darkness, a beacon for lost travelers. But where the Lampads offered a solemn, truthful path, the will-o'-the-wisp is a trickster. Its light dances and retreats, leading the weary wanderer deeper into treacherous bogs and away from solid ground. This is a corruption of the original purpose, a shift from divine guidance to malicious misdirection. The ancient nymphs illuminated a fixed destiny in the afterlife, while the later folklore spirits create chaos and uncertainty in the world of the living. Both are torch-bearers, yet their intentions define the worlds they inhabit, one of cosmic order, the other of terrestrial confusion. This transformation speaks to a fundamental change in how people viewed the unseen world. The Greek Lampads were part of a structured, understood cosmology, agents of a known goddess in a mapped underworld. The will-o'-the-wisp is an unexplained, capricious phenomenon, a spirit without a pantheon or a clear role, reflecting a world where the wilderness itself had become more mysterious and less divinely organized. Why would a culture replace a dependable, if chilling, guide with a deceptive, playful phantom? Perhaps because the later world felt less certain of its paths, both on Earth and in the hereafter. Perhaps the true domain of the Lampads was never a physical underworld at all, but the hidden landscape of the human mind. We can see their torches today not in ancient caves, but in the quiet, internal battles we all face. From a modern, psychological perspective, these nymphs transform into powerful symbols of our own unconscious, guiding the psyche through its most difficult passages. Their journey through Hades mirrors our own journeys through periods of profound fear, grief, or trauma. When we are lost in that kind of emotional darkness, when the familiar world has fallen away and every direction seems like an abyss, a guiding light emerges from within. This is not the rational, daylight logic of our conscious mind. It is something deeper, more intuitive, and often just as cold and stark as a lampad's flame. It is the part of us that knows the path forward, even when every other part wants to retreat. This inner lampad does not offer warm comfort or false promises. Its light is the light of brutal honesty, illuminating the painful truths we must acknowledge to heal. It shows us the path of confronting a loss, of facing a fear, of sitting with a difficult memory. This is not a pleasant journey. The terrain it reveals can be as harsh as the banks of the Acheron, filled with the sharp rocks of regret and the cold mists of sorrow. Yet this uncompromising guidance is the only way through. The light does not eliminate the darkness of our trauma, but it makes it navigable. It reveals the next step and then the next, creating a path where before there was only paralyzing fear. This is the process of individuation, of becoming a whole, integrated self by confronting the shadows we carry. The Lampad's torch, in this sense, becomes the light of self-awareness, a beacon born from our deepest, most primal self, leading us toward a hard-won enlightenment. What painful truth might your own inner Lampad be trying to illuminate for you right now? Their mythic torches now flicker across our digital screens, finding new life in the stories we tell today. In the popular Percy Jackson books, these underworld nymphs are reimagined as part of the bustling, modernized bureaucracy of the afterlife. They are not just eerie guides but workers with distinct personalities, their torches integrated into a world where the ancient and the contemporary collide. This interpretation makes them accessible and relatable, transforming them from distant figures of awe into characters who might complain about their duties or offer a wry comment to a demigod hero. It is a significant shift from silent symbolism to active personality, yet their core function as illuminators of the underworld's paths remains beautifully intact. An even more profound reinterpretation ignites within the video game Hades. Here, the Lampads are encountered as powerful, shimmering spirits, and their torches are not just for light but for combat. Their spectral flames become magical attacks that challenge the player, a direct translation of their mythological essence into interactive gameplay mechanics. The game delves deeper by presenting the Lampad Queen, Megara, one of the three Furies. This is a brilliant narrative fusion, merging the torch-bearing guide with the relentless punisher, suggesting that in the underworld, guidance and retribution are two sides of the same dark coin. The game's art direction bathes them in a cold, violet and blue glow, a perfect visual echo of the ancient descriptions of their chilling, otherworldly light. These modern portrayals do more than just borrow a name, they actively analyze the myth. They ask what such a being would be like if they had a voice, or how their light could manifest as a tangible force. A modern fantasy novel might use a Lampad as a tragic heroine, forever bound to a duty she did not choose, exploring themes of destiny and sacrifice. This ongoing reinvention proves the enduring power of the archetype. The Lampad is no longer a static figure on a vase. She is a dynamic concept, a creature of luminous purpose that each new generation can interpret anew. What might her torch reveal in the next great story yet to be told? Their profound anonymity is itself a powerful clue to their purpose. While other nymphs, like the playful Echo or the tragic Daphne, are celebrated in stories with names and personalities, the Lampads remain a silent, unified chorus. This was not an oversight by the ancient storytellers, but a deliberate choice that reinforces their core function. They are not individuals meant to be known, but forces meant to be relied upon. Think of a lighthouse keeper, the person who tends the flame. You do not need to know their name, their loves, or their sorrows for the beacon to guide you safely to shore. Its light is what matters. In the same way, the Lampads are their torches. Their collective identity emphasizes that their guidance is a universal constant, an impersonal service offered to every soul without favor or prejudice. Giving them names and personal stories would have anchored them to the world of the living, a realm of individual desires and dramas, which is precisely the world the dead have left behind. In the underworld, personal identity begins to dissolve, and the Lampads, as perfect mirrors of that realm, reflect this truth. They are the embodiment of a system, the living infrastructure of the afterlife, ensuring its smooth operation. Their lack of individual fame is the price of their absolute reliability. What would it mean for a lost soul if the one holding the light had her own ambitions, her own grief? The light itself would become conditional, and in the realm of final truths, such uncertainty would be a deeper torment than any darkness. The silence of a crossroads at midnight held a different kind of prayer. For ordinary Greeks, direct rituals for the Lampads were likely woven into the larger, trembling reverence for their mistress Hecate. When a person left a small cake, a handful of garlic, or a libation of wine at a three-way junction, they were not just honoring the goddess of magic. They were paying respect to the entire spectral entourage that moved with her, including the torch-bearing nymphs whose light defined the paths of the dead. These offerings were a form of sacred bargaining, a plea for clarity and safe passage in both a literal and spiritual sense. A farmer traveling a dark road might leave an offering, hoping the Lampad's influence would keep him on the solid path and away from the treacherous ravine, just as they guided souls away from the abyss. More profoundly, families who had recently lost a loved one might perform a private rite. Imagine a mother, her heart heavy with grief, approaching a lonely crossroads after sundown. She would bring not just an offering for Hecate, but a single, small clay lamp filled with oil. Lighting its wick, she would whisper a prayer not for the return of the deceased, but for their safe journey. This humble, mortal flame was a symbolic echo of the Lampad's torch, a tiny beacon sent into the darkness to guide her beloved shade, a plea to the unseen nymphs to recognize this new soul and illuminate its path. The offering was a map drawn in fire and faith, a desperate attempt to influence a journey that was already complete. What words would you whisper into the darkness, hoping a silent, glowing figure might hear? But could that gentle, guiding flame also become a weapon? The question of whether the Lampad's torches served a defensive or even punitive purpose strikes at the heart of their ambiguous nature. We must search for clues in the fragmented edges of their mythology, where their role as a passive guide begins to blur. On one hand, their serene and impartial character suggests their light was a universal tool, not a selective one. It fell equally upon the virtuous and the damned, revealing the path but never interfering with the soul's ultimate destination. This aligns with the idea of the torch as a pure symbol of revelation, not judgment. Yet the underworld was a dangerous place, teeming with monstrous entities and restless, malevolent spirits. It is difficult to believe these delicate nymphs traversed such treacherous terrain utterly defenseless. Their torchlight, which could reveal the true nature of things, might have held a power that was inherently repulsive to creatures of pure chaos or evil. A depiction on a late classical vase might show a Lampad holding her torch not as a beacon, but thrust forward, its flame causing a bestial shade to recoil in fear. This would not be an act of punishment, but of preservation, a way to keep the sacred path clear for the souls under their protection. The light that revealed a monster's true form could also be the barrier that held it at bay. This interpretation transforms their torch from a simple lantern into a ward, a mobile circle of protection that moved with them through the darkness. Their light maintained the order of the underworld, and sometimes order must be actively enforced. So were they guides or guards? The most compelling answer is that they were both, their torch a single tool with two edges, one to illuminate and one to repel. What monster would dare approach a light born from the river of unbreakable oaths? The boundary between their world and ours was not always a solid wall. While the Lampads were primarily guides for the departed, ancient whispers suggest their light could, on rare and momentous occasions, pierce the veil to touch the living. These were not casual encounters, but profound intersections at the very threshold of existence. The most likely moment for a mortal to glimpse a Lampad was in the final, flickering instance of life itself. As a person lay dying, their soul beginning to loosen its ties to the body, the absolute darkness of the underworld might have seeped into their vision. And in that gathering gloom, a single, cold point of light could appear. This was not the warm, welcoming light of a celestial paradise, but the stark, guiding flame of the nymph who had come to escort them. To the dying person, it might have manifested as a beautiful, solemn woman standing at the foot of their bed, her torch casting no shadows on the walls of the room, its glow visible only to the one crossing over. Her presence was a silent promise that the journey ahead would not be made in total disorientation. This was the ultimate mercy, a final earthly comfort, the assurance of a guide at the moment of greatest terror. Beyond the deathbed, their influence may have extended into the realm of dreams. As children of night who also birthed the dream spirits, the Lampads had a natural pathway into the sleeping human mind. A person tormented by grief, desperately seeking a sign from a lost loved one, might have their plea answered in a vision. In such a dream, the dreamer would not see the deceased directly, but might instead find themselves in a dark, featureless landscape. Then a Lampad would appear, her torch illuminating not a path, but the translucent, peaceful face of the departed shade for a single, comforting moment before the light faded. The nymph herself was never the message, only the reliable conduit, the bearer of the light that made a final, silent farewell possible. These speculative interactions complete their portrait as beings of profound purpose. Their duty was to ensure no soul was lost, and that sacred responsibility began not in the underworld, but at the very moment a life in our world ended. What greater peace could there be than to see your guide waiting for you before the journey has even truly begun? Her day begins not with a sunrise, but with the soft, collective sigh of 1,000 extinguished souls. The first duty is to kindle the torch, a motion as natural as breathing. She draws the flame not from any spark, but from the cool, misty air of the river Acheron itself, the very essence of sorrow giving birth to a steady blue-white light. This light is her voice, her purpose, her only tool. She moves from the riverbank onto the main path, her bare feet making no sound on the obsidian gravel. The air is thick and still, carrying a faint metallic scent like old coins and damp stone. Her first charge is a newly arrived shade, a young man trembling at the edge of the abyss. He does not see Charon arguing with a spirit who lacks the fare for passage, nor does he notice the distant, furious shrieks echoing from the pits of Tartarus. His entire world has shrunk to the terrifying void before him until her torchlight falls upon his face. He flinches not from heat, but from the sudden, stark clarity it brings. She does not speak, only turns, and the path ahead materializes under her glow. He follows, his silent gratitude a palpable warmth in the chill air, a feeling she acknowledges with a slight, unseen tilt of her head. The journey is long and the scenery shifts. She guides him past the wailing fields, where the light catches on the twisted forms of those consumed by eternal, fruitless longing. The shades there reach for her light, but she does not deviate, her torch creating a protective corridor of visibility. Later, she passes one of her sisters, their lights crossing in the gloom like silent greetings. They need no words, their shared purpose is their entire language. A low growl rumbles from a side cavern, and a hulking, indistinct form shifts in the darkness. She simply raises her torch higher, and the cold beam seems to solidify the air around her. The creature recoils, not in pain, but in recognition of an authority it cannot challenge. Her light defines what is path and what is obstacle, what is order and what is chaos. Her most solemn task comes when she escorts a soul to the judges. She stands back, her torch held steady as the shade recounts its life. The light does not sway, it does not judge, it only ensures that every memory, every deed is seen with absolute honesty. Once the judgment is passed, she leads the soul onward, either toward the muted gray plains of Asphodel or to the shimmering, distant gates of Elysium. She feels no joy for one, no pity for the other. Her duty is the journey itself, the sacred act of ensuring that no one, regardless of their final destination, is ever lost along the way. As her shift ends, she returns to the banks of the Styx, the light of her torch dimming until it is just an ember in her palm. She does not sleep but rests in the quiet hum of the underworld, a single note in the endless, harmonious chorus of guidance, waiting for the next soul who needs to see the road ahead. What would it be like to have a purpose so pure, so completely divorced from the desires of the self? The flame of the Lampads did not go out in a single moment, but dimmed slowly over centuries as the very soil of belief shifted beneath it. Greek religion was a living, breathing tradition, intimately tied to the city-state and its public rituals. The Lampads, as deeply personal guides for a solitary journey, fit less comfortably into this civic framework than the great Olympians who governed harvests, wars, and laws. Their role was private, their domain was internal, and as philosophical schools like Platonism and Stoicism began to gain influence, the concept of the afterlife itself started to change. For a philosopher, the fate of the soul was a matter of virtue and reason, not a literal journey past a river of woe requiring a nymph with a torch. The underworld became more abstract, a symbolic landscape for the soul's moral progress or its return to a divine source. In such a system, what need was there for a specific torch-bearing spirit to light the way? The path was now illuminated by wisdom, not by a spectral flame. This philosophical abstraction created a space where the old, vivid myths could begin to fade, their details blurring into generalities, but the final blow to their prominence came from a new and radically different worldview. Christianity swept across the ancient world with a powerful, singular narrative of salvation and a defined afterlife of heaven, hell, and purgatory. This new cosmology had its own guides, angels and saints, and its own absolute source of light, the divine grace of God. In this framework, there was no room for the daughters of a pagan night goddess. Their torches were seen not as sacred guides, but as demonic deceptions, the foolish lights of a heathen past that needed to be extinguished. The complex personal journey of the soul through a Greek underworld was replaced by a divine judgment that was both final and universally applicable. The Lampads and the entire intricate machinery of the old afterlife were rendered obsolete. They became stories, then superstitions, and finally fading ink on crumbling parchment. Their quiet disappearance asks us a difficult question when a culture's deepest beliefs about death transform. What happens to the spirits who once inhabited that space? Yet their legacy is not measured in forgotten temples, but in the quiet power of their symbolism. The Lampads were far more than mythological footnotes. They were the embodiment of a profound and universal idea that even in the deepest darkness, a light can appear to guide us forward. Their cold torches represented the stark clarity of truth, the revelation of paths we must walk, and the simple, profound mercy of not being abandoned to the void. They were the gentle hand on the shoulder of the cosmos, ensuring every soul, regardless of its deeds, found its way. This is why their story endures long after the last offerings were left at the crossroads. They speak to a fundamental human hope that our own journeys through both life and death will not be made in total isolation. Their light persists in our stories, in our art, and in the quiet corners of our imagination, a flickering promise that no path is so dark that it cannot be illuminated. So we pass the torch to you. The myths of the underworld are rich with captivating figures, from the sorrowful Persephone to the steadfast Hecate, the relentless Furies to the resigned boatman Charon. Which of these ancient deities or spirits of the deep captures your imagination the most? Share your favorite underworld myth in the comments below and keep the conversation and the light burning.